Eric Wilder. With us, we have Theresa Harlan Tiger, who is with us to talk. On our Patriot YouTube channel, folks. So if you want to know, you don't want to see that photo, Teresa, or you don't want to be on YouTube.
No, the your sound goes in and out.
Today. You can't hear.
I can barely hear you.
Okay, I'm not hearing you either. I'm not hearing you. Why am I not?
Audio.
There.
Oh, there you are.
There you are.
Recording in progress. I've never heard that before. Okay, well, once again, This is about 2 weeks old from the Bohemian, an excellent article. If you have not read it, you can look it up online. That is Theresa. Now, in all fairness and honesty, Theresa Harlan is a member of the board of directors of the Native Media Resource Center. The NMRC owns KGUA. She is a longtime Native activist, an activist for Native art. She worked at UC Davis, ran the Gorman Museum there many years. She's been involved for many years on many different levels. And of course, Eric Wilder, you know, from Kashaya, who lives at Point Arena, who also is currently on the president of the board of directors of Gualala Arts Center. He also works with us at NMRC. You hear him once a month. And I thought it would be good for you to hear both of these stories together because they belong together. Another thing I wanted to show you, this wonderful legacy book that Theresa Harlan helped put together. She sang me a good luck song, photos of the great Maidu photographer, Dugan Aguilar, who is sort of the Edward Curtis of California Indians. And that's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be that. And if you want to learn about California, contemporary California Indians, not people stuck in time in a museum somewhere, this is a great book. So, and also, Theresa, you worked with for many years with Heyday Books as well. So welcome, Theresa, welcome, Eric. So the first thing I want to do is, Theresa, just can you give us a brief synopsis of your story? And also, I have to say, I do not know how to pronounce this. How do you pronounce that?
I am not an expert either. Tamalhui is what I'm hearing. And so I just want to say thank you for inviting me. And the story is that I am the adopted daughter. I am by blood Kiowa Pueblo and Jemez Pueblo. And my grandmother's from Laguna Pueblo, on my mother's side. And I was adopted at birth by my mom, Elizabeth Campili Harlan, who was Coast Miwok. She's passed. And my dad was non-native, John Harlan. And so I was raised in here in California on the stories from my Coast Miwok family along Tomales Bay, especially along the western shores of Tomales Bay.
I'm going to stop you there for a second. Is this your mother or your grandmother?
My mother.
That's what I thought. Okay. And you can see Tomales Bay in the background. Okay.
So my mom grew up on Tomales Bay on the western shores at Laird's Landing in the home that her grandfather built in the mid 19th century. Joe Felix and his brother, they built the house that she grew up in on Laird's Landing, and then her extended family, her aunt lived on Marshall Beach, which is a popular place for people to go. There was 2 homes there, and her extended family lived all over Tomales Bay. And so she grew up there. She went to Pierce Point School. Her grandmother, her mother, her grandmother, her great grandmother, they lived, they died there. And so, you know, our family believed that they lived there continuously, except for 200 years of disruption from the Spanish missions. But they lived in Tomales Bay for over 10,000 of years. My mother's ancestors, their bones are there at Tomales Bay in archaeological sites, sacred sites. They're there. And so in the 1950s, after my grandmother passed, a neighboring rancher falsely claimed that he owned that land and he was only letting my grandmother live there to be nice. So my uncle, Victor Souza, fought back in court, fought the eviction, and they lost that. He appealed and they lost that. But he had oral testimony that said that the family had been there before San Francisco was really just Yerba Buena. And the oral testimony was not enough to outweigh the fact that there wasn't a property tax record of my family. And this is a story that's all over the United States of Native people losing ancestral homelands because there isn't a property tax record. And it's just amazing that Native people have to prove that, you know, their ancestral ties to their ancestral lands based in a non-Native, in a white system of courts and papers and documents.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna stop you there for a minute. There's a lot you said there. I want to bring Eric in at this point. Does any of Teresa's stories sound familiar to you, coming from Kashaya or the Bokea?
Oh yeah, it's all sounds very similar. Yeah. In my tribe, back in the 1840s, you know, when the Russians came, our people were, our territory was from where Duncan's Landing is all the way to the Wallala River to the north, and over near where Lake Sonoma is, and, you know, out through Guerneville. And then when the Russians came, we had villages. We didn't have like one big city. We had people that were living in different villages throughout that territory, and they were all brought to Fort Ross as a workforce. And when the Russians left, ranchers came in, and our people were scattered. We have a period called the scattered time, where we had no place to live. We were living in villages along, like from where Cruz Ranch is all the way to Sturt's Point, and up near where our reservation is now at Sturt's Point, and then different areas around there until for 40 years. And then one of the ranchers named Charlie Hop married a lady from our tribe, and she would go around and visiting her family members, which were like over in Annapolis and down at Cruz Ranch at Salt Point State, where Salt Point State Park is, and Sturt's Point during the day. And so she'd be gone all day, and so he finally asked if our people could come, asked the Bureau of Indian Affairs if our people could come live there on his ranch and work for him, and that if he could get some kind of aid. And so they sent him food and blankets and stuff for our people, and agreed to that. And then
your family was to be workers for him.
Oh yeah, yeah. He didn't want his wife traveling all over, and so once he started getting supplies and food and stuff for our people, he, instead of for our people to live on, then he set up a store and sold it all to our people.
Oh God. Okay. Again, I'm gonna stop you guys because you guys have so much history to share. I'm gonna share this photo. It's gonna cover your faces for a second. All right. Who knows? California, this is your history. This is John Fremont. He was hired by President Lincoln. He was here to clear out the Indians of California. Some of you may live in the town of Fremont. Some of you may know, if you're Native, you know of what he did to your families in the whole, what's now the East Bay and in the Sacramento area. California, this is your unknown history. Why it's so important to hear from Theresa Harlan, Eric Wilder, and so many others as we do bring you local history, because we're talking about Marin County, we're talking about Sonoma County, and we're talking about Mendocino County and what happened not so many years ago to their families. So I'm sorry, keep interrupting, but I want our listeners to understand the importance of your stories. This isn't just a woman, Theresa Harlan, trying to make a name for herself or trying to fight for something that, she's just, this is important. We started the show with Buffy St. Marie's song, Power in the Blood. It's in our DNA. So Theresa, even though your DNA may have more Tewa in it, you were raised, Tewa in it, you were raised by this family to love Point Reyes. What did you learn from that?
What I learned is that the connection, even though my family was evicted, never goes away. Because when our family would gather for functions, there was always stories about the Bay. Her cousin would say, "Hey, Liz, remember when?" And then there would just be stories and laughter and laughter. And then my mom kept a subscription to the Point Reyes Light until she passed. And then on weekends, we would take drives out there to the Bay and visit her niece, Virginia Jensen, at the Oyster Company and go to the cemeteries. But my dad would always ask her, "Do you want to drive out, like towards the house?" And my mom would always shake her head no. So I never got the opportunity to experience it with her. And I think it's just because of the ultimate rejection. And that, there was a loss there. That would have been our family home. When I testified before the California Coastal Commission and I had to listen to ranchers talk about their fourth and fifth generation lineage out there, I kept thinking about my mom and her 10,000-year ancestral lineage at Point Reyes, and about how our family didn't have the opportunity to continue to say that we are from Point Reyes, or we do, but we didn't have the opportunity to live there. We didn't get compensation for the land that was taken from us. And it breaks my heart when I think about my uncle, Victor Souza, who fought for that land and died a few years after the court case was lost. But he was raised by an old aunt. And so I know he has these old ties to that land and that information that that old aunt passed to him. That's gone, that we lost it from our family. I'm sure it's out there. It never goes away. I never believe that traditional knowledge goes away. It's there. So anyway, that's that connection. That's the stories, the laughter at the parties and family gatherings. But then when my mother and I were sitting across the kitchen table playing card games, that's when the stories would come out that would have meaning and more intimate stories of what it was like for her growing up at Point Reyes at Tomales Bay.
Thank you so much for that. And Theresa mentioned she testified, and she was referring to testifying at the California Coastal Commission just a few weeks ago, because there is also this ongoing battle with the cattle ranchers wanting to kill the Tule elk at Point Reyes. And Theresa testified to try and stop that from happening, and also testifying that was her family's ancestral lands. And she lost, although it was a close vote, 5-4, but nevertheless, the killing of the Tule elk at Point Reyes, many of you see them when you're out at the Point Reyes Lighthouse or Seashore, that will continue. So this ongoing destruction of traditional lands and cultures, no, it never leaves. I'm going to switch back to Eric for a minute, if you will. And Eric, again, I'm asking you, since you're right here, how much of this rings true with your family?
It's all the same story, the hard part for us as Native people is we never had a written language, so that whole thing of, well, if it's written, then that must be true kind of a thing happens to our people. And for, legal people, it's more like, well, that's just hearsay. And, that's all we have is our word, and we have no way to prove it because we didn't write it down anywhere, and that's kind of the thing. And like Theresa says, they acknowledge that we were there, but they're like, well, where's the proof? And the proof of our people being there is all in the archaeology. You have mortars and pestles and middens and stuff that are evidence of our people being there. And when you look back at the history before European contact, you see the abundance. You read all about the abundance of timber and animals. There were elk here, there were otters, there were wolves, all of these things that are here that aren't here now, and that wasn't our fault. So I mean, all of these things, like there's like in Theresa's story, there's this whole wanting to keep the history of the cattle ranch era, but they, we're okay to be acknowledged in the past and being a romantic story of the past, but we're still here. We're still trying to take care of the land as best we can under the restrictions we have to live under now. That doesn't change. That doesn't change our duty and our agreement with the Creator to take care of those things, and we still try to. Regardless, no U.S. law is going to change our us doing that, and so it's the same thing with my people. We have a lot of construction and things going on, and like you and I talked recently. It's like there, I'm here fighting for our people to be looked at as some people. We're in the present, we're here, and and then and then they go ahead and erect a whole monument to some people from in Russia, and never had anything for our people here, which was an insult to my people, and they had voiced that to me. And so, it's still that fight to, like, we're not from the past. We're not only from the past, I should say, and we can contribute to.
Dan, I want to thank you, Eric. I want to show you. Here's one bit of possible good news. Up in Westport area, there's an area of the beach that that may be returned because McGuire has sponsored a bill that would give 172 acres of Mendocino oceanfront back to 3 tribes, a collaboration of 3 tribes up here in Westport. And it's one of the few, and it's one of those beaches people have driven on forever. And of course, there's opposition, one being a local winery. They don't want to give this land back to those 3 tribes. There's also a lot of things that are being written about now about why it's important for tribes to be given the stewardship of lands back. And because, as tribes know, and of course the anthropologists know, tribes knew how to take care of the land. Now, with the fires, finally, fire suppression in the state of California has recognized the traditional burns that California tribes did. But at the same time, it's very hard to get land returned back to tribes, useful land. Also, what we're talking about. Theresa, what do you know about that?
Well, I read David Shower's article in The Atlantic about returning national park lands to native tribal people. And I think that's a great idea, because when you look at Point Reyes National Seashore, there's over 70,000 acres at the seashore. 28,000 of them are dedicated to ranching. We had Kulilokolo out there, which is 1.5 acres for gatherings like the Strawberry Festival and the Maria Copa Honor Dance. And that no longer is an active place. We have the undisclosed family, my family's 12 to 15 acres of land out there. And so I think Native people would have a better, natural plant and animal life would have a better future up there under the management of Native people, where you wouldn't have the Tule elk held in by fences so that they can't access grasses and waters. I mean, I drive out there often and I see the water holding areas, the water levels are going down, down, down. And on the Tule Elk Preserve, they can't forage naturally. And so they're sick. And cattle carry Yon's disease, which is lethal to elk. And, the ratings of the fecal bacteria in waters in California is the highest at Point Reyes National Seashore, from 6,000 head of cattle. And so Kehoe Beach, Abbott's Lagoon, all of these waters have high levels of fecal bacteria that, there's yearling seals out there, in that water. So it would have to be under better management, and under the current amendment that is going through, that the cattle, the ranchers would be able to diversify and bring in other livestock like goats and sheep and chickens, and also allowed guard dogs. So that's going to have an impact on the natural animals out there, indigenous animals, who are going to also be attracted to those animals. So it's just a complete imbalance when you look at the prioritization of ranching at Point Reyes over the indigenous history and life that's out there. And that, under native management, I think that, there would be a future for plant life, indigenous plant life and animal life, and for native people. We would have a place to come together. And also you would know the true story of the history of the ranches, which was based on the suppression, the murder, the genocide of native people at Point Reyes.
Let me remind people, you're listening to Peggy's Place this morning, and today we're talking about some very important history, your own local history. We're talking about Marin County, Sonoma County, and Mendocino County, and our native people here. We're talking with Theresa Harlan, who is fighting at Point Reyes to save her family's little bit of land there, but it's bigger than that. It's not only that, it's not just the wooden structure that's left over where she spent a lot of her time growing up. She can take you there. Eric Wilder, who is a former tribal chairman at Kashaya, of course, we know his wonderful art and eloquence, and he is currently the president of the board at Gualala Arts Center. I find it very interesting that both of you have a very strong background. I mean, Eric is an artist, Theresa as an art historian and curator. I want to talk about that in just a moment. I'm going to show one other photo here. This is from that Newsweek article. It's several years old about genocide in California. And here we have the Pope then, Pope Francis, standing in front of a sculpture of Spanish-born Franciscan friar Junipero Serra at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. So we had the gold rush. We also had, but before everybody, the Spanish and the missions. And many of you may not know that those missions, and everybody I shouldn't say everybody, but mission history in the state of California usually starts around 3rd or 4th grade. But to California Indians, those missions represent something else. A lot of them see it as a giant tombstone. What you may not know is right at those missions are bodies of Native people, Native children. Sometimes they're mass graves, folks. They're right there. And those have been not, of course, highlighted when you study the history of missions here in California. The genocide against Theresa's adopted family, against Eric's family, against the Nisenan people up in Northern California, against all of the California Indians was paid for by the US government. By the time what was the United States was coming to California, right before it became a state, they decided there would be no treaty making, none at all. And that in fact, they would just kill off every Indian. And there was a bounty, I believe it was $5 a head, adult or child, it didn't matter. And that is also what is in the blood, going back to Buffy St. Marie's song, of Theresa Harlan, of Eric, myself. We all carry this history that we all know. But here in California, the brutality was so blatant. And a lot of these people, Sutter, Fremont, are made heroes. Their statues are everywhere. And no one really knows their true history, what was done to Native people here, but Native people know. And the thing that I just chills my blood every time I hear this term called quailing. You guys know what quailing was? Quailing was when Indian children would be stolen, thrown in the back of a horse-drawn wagon, and taken to San Francisco to be sold as slaves. And that was the sound that the children made as they were being driven away the cries that went out. So California, this is your history. Sonoma County, Marin County, Mendocino County. This is what we're talking about. And so we started out talking about George Floyd and how that has allegedly started, his terrible death started a racial reckoning. Racial reckoning means right here in our backyards. And so while this may be hard for some of you to listen to, I'm sure most of it is news to most of you. It's vitally important to know where you live here on these lands that were never yours, never mine. I'm a guest here as well. I'm from Oklahoma. I can tell you the same stories that happened to my family in Oklahoma, but we're talking about California. This is Peggy's Place this morning on KGWA, and you can also see us on YouTube right now. And you can see, and some of these articles, we posted links to a lot of these articles. It's just the beginning of an education, of a racial reckoning. Before I go back to the racial reckoning, no, I want to go back to what I was saying just a few moments ago between Theresa and Eric. What is it about Native art, Indigenous art? And I'll start with you, Theresa. What drew you to that to be your life's field work?
Well, when I went to UC Berkeley and I took a lot of Native American history courses. And when I became exposed to contemporary Native American art, for me, Native art just made that history alive, and it made it current. And it showed how, like, the 1887 Dawes Allotment Act was still wielding its impact on Native people. And, that's where you learn all the history and also misinformation, because in my California history class, they told me that Coast Miwok people were extinct. And I had to raise my hand and say, I don't think so. I have a whole family of Coast Miwok. But so the artists to me are the visionaries and the message carriers, and they, through their art, can make this important information, the history, they can make it be felt by others. And it recognizes the experiences of Native people. Most Native artists that I've come across, their first audience are Native audiences. And so it's where they can see themselves reflected. They can see their history validated. They can see their stories shared, and they can see that humor and that love that we have in our communities. They can see that also reflected. So for me, that's why I was drawn to art, because it just made everything come alive with passion and power.
And who, could you just name a few California artists that you would recommend to people? I mean, there's a lot. So
there's a lot. I mean, Gerald Clark down in Cahuilla Land, he just had a big exhibition at Palm Springs. Frank LaPena is famous for his work. You mentioned Dugan Aguilar. There's so many people that I am afraid that I may not mention that come to mind, and so I'm kind of looking around my walls to see. But
I'll help you out. How about Harry Fonseca, Judy Lowry, Jean Lamar?
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, the women artists, and it's, Jean Lamar is famous for her piece where she found a photograph of an ant in the Hearst Museum, and then she recreated that picture with a contemporary picture of her same ant, and then made it beautiful with lace and her colors of purple. And so that's the kind of thing in which artists can pull our people out of these, dungeons and storage areas and museums, and make them living and give them the recognition and the respect and loving treatment of who they are. So, yeah.
Eric?
Well, for me, it's a personal thing. I started out wanting to be a singer, and I went through ceremony for that. And then
Traditional singer.
Yes, a traditional singer. And, and then when my grandmother passed away, she decided to close the roundhouse. And I was not able to do that. And I had, been wanting to learn all of that about my people, the tradition, culture, all of that. And and so, that part is a long story, but I threw myself into my art, and I didn't plan on wanting to do native art, themed art. I wanted to do comic books. That was my thing. And then I just fell into doing animation, and then ended up working for my tribe, and then both ended up using my art and my cultural knowledge to help to preserve our people's knowledge. It had been recorded in a written form and a video before by my grandmother, but for me to add visuals to it, it seemed it was a lot easier, and sparked more interest in the more people, and the next generation for me, and my generation for people that hadn't grown up on our reservation in ceremony and stuff. And so it was continuing on for me. It was continuing on that whole thing that my grandmother had said, was that she didn't want to see our people lost. And she had seen in a vision that if she didn't do all of that, our people would be lost, not knowing who they are. And then for me to add to that, to help to preserve and give our people a firm rock to stand on, meaning they know who they are by their stories, by their, hearing about their ceremonies and native food plant uses and things. All of that turned out to be a very important part of my life, and I was able to do that through art. And it was very hard because, if it wasn't for like Harry Fonseca and all of those people before from the 70s, they were brave. And I didn't understand at the time, but to put imagery of our people in their ceremonial costumes, for lack of a better word right now, but regalia, was frowned upon by our own people. It was like selling out our people by using that kind of imagery, and they opened that door for people like me and the next generation to continue that and to continue to use that for the purpose of preserving who we are. And for me, that was a big thing, because it helps tell the story of who we were and who we are still. And that's the most important part, is that we're still here.
Yeah, I mean, L. Frank did that whole series on the missions.
Frank Enriquez.
Yeah, L. Frank Manriquez did this whole series on the missions. And in her, ironic, humorous way, but also cutting, to the point about what the impact of the missions were on California people.
Eric, when you are beginning to work on whatever it is, whether it's your card or your calendar or a poster, what are you feeling? What takes you to get that art from Eric out on to whatever it is, the paper, the canvas?
Well, I know that if I'm going to be using anything, like for our people, all Native people, whether it's a basket that has a design on it, or regalia or anything like that, all of those things were brought forth through our spiritual leaders through the Creator. Now, for my tribe, it was through our leaders, where we had a dream religion, so that was brought forth by the Spirit through the dream. But all of those things, to honor the earth, to honor our food, to celebrate, all of that was all brought forth by the Spirit, the songs and everything. And so when I start to do an image for somebody or for myself, it's always with the prayer, because I'm using those things which did not come from my people, but from the Creator. And so I have to honor that. I'm going to be using that to create something, but I have to sacrifice something for that. And so whenever I do any kind of artwork that has imagery from my people, it becomes part of something for me that I have to put up food for and prayer for every year, 4 times a year. So I have to do that because I'm using that, and that comes from the Spirit, all of those things. And so that all has to be honored. And so, it's like my grandmother would say, it's a burden added to you, that you have to feed that. It's like me having a regalia, you have to sacrifice for it and feed it in order for it to be, because you're praying for that message to go out, to teach people, for people to learn about our people and not forget us. And opened that door for the next generation to learn and and continue it on. So that's it's a big deal. It's a big deal making art with native imagery.
And we honor you for that. By the way, one of our donation checks came to me in the mail yesterday for our fund drive, and had one of your cards, and they'd enclosed one of your cards. It was just very sweet. So Theresa, I want to take that thought another step further. I want to go back to your lands in Marin County, in why you are fighting to keep this land. It's not about your family, as you say, it's about the tribe, it's about the history. And one thing you said earlier was, one of the outcomes that you want, and I do want to hear of what all those outcomes are, but one of the outcomes was a place to hold ceremonies. Why is that so important?
I want it to be a place where it's living, besides a place where people can gather and a place where people can heal through ceremony, because that's where the people are. There are so many sacred sites, archaeological sites out there that the people are still there. And just like Eric was mentioning, they need to be fed. Their spirits need to be fed. Their spirits need to be acknowledged. And so this is in this journey of wanting this property, this house, which represents so much more than you mentioned structures. It represents belief in survivorance, but it should be a place with a future. And so when I was talking with Superintendent Kinkle, our family was talking about a living center that would have a future, a living center that would also include the what if our family wasn't swept away with 200 years of mission experience. Then there would be basket activities there. There would be, a place where people could gather and in a traditional way. And that it is so important that people know that how alive and complex Coast Miwok people had. They had fishing villages, they had big villages, they had dance pits, they had all of this activity, but it's what you see there is just a shadow and a hint, not even a hint of that. And so that's why it was so, frustrating to know that the Point Reyes Peninsula Indigenous Archaeological Nomination was shelved for so many years while the ranch's historic nomination was pushed through. And so there's the complete imbalance because ranching degrades archaeological sites, sacred sites. And so that it just became such a bigger picture of not just my family, but of a place where people can, people gathered seaweed off those coasts. I mean, it was used by more than just my family. And so it represents so much more that I feel like Point Reyes National Seashore needs to be a welcoming place. Because right now with the almost 400 miles of fencing, Native people don't feel comfortable going there. And with such a strong white ranching presence, people of color don't feel comfortable going there. The rangers don't reflect us. We don't have brown rangers. It's mostly, the workforce at National Park System. So, I don't mean to meander, but it just once you start looking at one aspect, it leads you to another aspect. It leads you to another aspect. And I just feel like this imbalance where the wildlife are suffering, the plant life are suffering, Native folks have already suffered, that it needs to be restored.
To me, this is the classic Western battle that we all grew up with. It was the cowboys and the cattle versus the sheep ranchers. And we saw this play out on TV for decades, continuing this history that had no Indians in it. and it was all about the cattle and the water wars.
Right.
And water right now, we all say water is sacred, and it's disappearing.
It's disappearing. And what's
yeah.
also so frustrating is that the ranchers were paid for their properties and they were given 25 years to vacate, or the longest living spouse. They never left. So it's ironic. Our taxpayer money goes to maintaining the roads, their fences, the buildings. So we are subsidizing a very elite group of ranchers at Point Reyes National Seashore. That's, everyone should be outraged about that.
Well, Eric, you have a similar situation. Your tribe was, they say given, but it was not given. You bought back a few acres right here on the coast, just south of us, south of Sea Ranch. And the family there's one family member, and I don't want to, I don't want to say bad things. I'm not talking about the family themselves, because there are many members of that family. They've been good to the Kashaya. But there's one family member that's going to be allowed there to live until they die. And your tribe is not allowed to do anything other than build pathways through there.
Yeah, only like if we wanted to do a native plant trail, that's about it. We can't do any kind of visitor center, or if we even wanted to do a building where we want to bring back our artifacts that are spread out throughout the country. We can't even do that. There are a lot of restrictions on it. And the ironic part of it is, in the media, all these other organizations are saying this land was given to us, and it was not given to us. And and the thing, going back to what Theresa said about the ranching, even like, say, let's just take Wallala. If you had a tree fall down on somebody's home, they would have somebody clean it all up right now and, take care of that and repair that house, and all of that stuff would have to be taken care of. In the last storm we had a big tree that fell right in front of my mom's house, fell on their cars and destroyed their cars. And the tribe was unable to even cut the trees. They had to wait until they got permission from the Bureau of Indian Affairs to be able to cut those trees away. These were big redwoods that were laying in front of my mom's house and destroyed her cars, almost hit the house. And they could not do anything. They couldn't do anything until the Bureau of Indian Affairs just, okay, now you have permission to cut the trees away. So they just sat there for weeks, and that's the kind of thing that we still have to go through. We're just like, you think people are under the impression that we get free service and we get free this and free that. We do not. We're under strict restrictions from the federal government.
Absolutely. I'm not even a tribe. I'm just a person. And some people wondered why we were doing a fundraiser, because they said, why don't you just ask the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, for money? It doesn't work that way. And even if it did, you hear from Eric and from Theresa, and Sal Martinez just wrote an editorial about where's the housing that's been promised for decades in Point Arena. You need housing out there. Why isn't that being built? Indian healthcare. We all hear the stories of, not that all Indian healthcare is bad, but there's some very bad service and bad people there. So again, we started out by inviting Theresa Harlan here to talk about her story, her battle for her family land, and what it could be at the Point Reyes seashore. Eric Wilder, of course, is from here in Kashaya. I'm a Muskogee from Oklahoma, where, we just basically won this major Supreme Court victory that says, yes, the tribes own most of the state, basically. And boy, are they mad about that back there, and trying to change everything they can to take that away. So this is just this ongoing history. I want to remind you, the folks who are watching on YouTube, I just want to show once again, Theresa, your mother's photo, and how happy she looks with, there's her cows there.
That's my grandmother.
Your grandmother, and in Tamales Bay, and how peaceful it looks there, and how lovely the life there was, what it must have been like for Eric and his families generations ago, with your different villages. The Yokayo people were some of the people that were attacked by Fremont, and some of those people. So, this is not ancient history. That's what is the hardest thing for people to understand. Indian people are here, they are alive, they are still practicing their religions, their customs. Oh, and by the way, I don't know of any tribes that fought over religion. I don't know any tribes that said, well, the pipe is better than the whale, or anything like that. And incorporated in some cases, like your Pueblo ancestors, Theresa, the feast days, to stay alive, basically. If you had to, how were you going to stay alive if you didn't agree to practice this religion? And so you adapted to it in one way or another. So we want people to understand this history is not history, it's alive. Theresa, again, back to where do you go from here? Where do you go now that your story is out? You're talking to people about it. What happens next?
Well, for folks that actually want to be involved in activities regarding this expansion of ranching, there is a group called Restore Point Race. It's run by the Resource Renewal Institute, and which is working with the Center for Biological Diversity in the Western Watersheds. And the Restore Point Race has a website, there's a petition, there's letters to write to Jared Huffman, Diane Feinstein, Secretary Harlan. So that is a platform for folks who if we've persuaded them to reconsider what ranching means at Point Reyes National Seashore. That's a venue for folks to take action. The steps for me, is to continue to work with the Point Reyes, with the National Park Service, to move forward with the historic nomination of our family for its Coast Miwok history. Right now, it's included in the historic ranches for K Ranch. So that's our family's work, is to get a historic nomination dedicated to our family's history, Coast Miwok history at Laird's Landing. The other thing that we're interested in doing is changing the name from Laird's Landing, Laird was only there for about 6 years. He used to ship his butter off from that cove, to Felix Cove. And we'd also like to have Marshall Beach renamed. We'd also have to continue the work of the restoration of the buildings, signage, work with the park system. And for the larger picture, we probably will have to work with Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria for the interpretation of Coast Miwok people. And then the other thing is asking, personally, for me, asking the park to revive that Indigenous archaeological nomination that is shelved, and to resubmit that nomination. So those are the things that I'm looking at, whether for my work. And
okay, great. Well, that's a lot of work, and you're going to need support for that. Eric, we just have a couple of minutes left. What do you have to say in summary of what you're looking toward the future?
Well, I continue to try to bridge that relationship with non-native people, and what it comes down to is education. We have to educate people on who we are and that we're still here. And until we're recognized as that, and really in your heart see that, oh, they're still here, then it's really hard for us to accomplish anything, or be, accepted with anything, or work together in anything until that's done. Mm-hmm.
So why do you think people do have this image that Indians have, we're just gone? It's
because of what they're taught in school.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll start there.
Teresa?
Well, I also think about whose story gets told.
True.
And that, I think the age of innocence is over. I think that, we have to tell the full story. And unfortunately, the predominant story has been that Native people, you have to imagine Native people and that, we don't exist like Eric was saying. And so I think it's education, and it's about telling all sides of the story, the multiple stories.
I worked on a Smithsonian sort of class on the history of Native Americans, and what became really clear to me, it was photography. It was when the beginning, the cameras and photography came along with the Indian Wars, Civil War and the Indian Wars, and those images that they saw of the Plains Indians has really been the predominant one, although Curtis did other things and dressed people up, and but he did actually a service in doing what he could. But it's those photos, and then come along so many of the current contemporary photographers. Oh gosh, I just lost his name. The photographer who did so much in the Southwest in the 70s and 80s. Then Halias Ginny with the Bay Area community, Dugan and his photos. There's so many photographers out there who are looking at contemporary Indians, who we are today. And it's hard for people to reconcile those images, because those black and white stark images that were from the Indian Wars is all that people know of Indians. I'm sorry, I have to cut it off. You've got 10 seconds, Theresa, if you want to say one last thing.
I was just going to say family albums are so important, because once Native people got little brownie cameras just like everybody else, and those family albums in homes are significant in telling the story.
Eric, we need to do some revisions over to the park at Guala Point Park, and we put an exhibit up several years ago. It's time to move forward. That's going to be it. Theresa Harlan, thank you so much for sharing your story. And Eric Wilder, of course, thank you so much. This has been Peggy's Place this morning on KGUA. We've got more links we'll put up for you. A very important story. And as I said earlier, this is your history, California. And so say their names: Theresa Harlan, Eric Wilder, and all of our other wonderful artists that we mentioned. And as we go forth, and don't forget RCMS, look it up on the Facebook page, Point Arena or Gualala Point Facebook page. They're giving out shots today. All right, we got to go to Native America Calling. Take care, you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you soon, as soon as I can. And don't forget, you're up at Tiger. Hey, Tiger, happy birthday. Don't forget, you can also see this on KGUA's YouTube page, and check it out. We've got a lot of stuff there. Bye.